All right, let's get started. Okay. Popping up here, so I'm going to assume everyone can see the slides here. Class is called Leverage to Wealth. What it's mostly about is investment properties. The leverage being leveraging your equity, leveraging your assets, and it's more than just the equity you have in property. You can access funds in many different places. Long story short, it's putting the value, the cash value, the equity value you have to work for you so that you can build a portfolio through investment real estate and build wealth. The nice thing about investment real estate is it's seemingly passive income. Obviously, there's a lot of extra work going into if you're doing a remodel, if you're doing a rehab, if you're going to rent these properties out, and you're not using a management company. There's a bit of legwork to collect payments and find your tenants and all of that. But nevertheless, it's very popular. I'll have some recommendations later on in the slides of websites you could access. I mean, there are several agents in this office that are extremely successful at real estate on the investment side. And hopefully this will, give you a little bit of a look at how we build a portfolio. And yeah, so we'll get started. So the agenda today, we're going to start with just some basic knowledge on investment financing. We'll review some of the options you have specifically for financing investment properties, funds to close, some pros and cons, things to keep in mind. Hey, Crystal. Filing taxes, that's an important one. There's kind of two sides to that. I'll get to that later. The Burr method, we'll get into that a little bit. That's super popular. If you're on any of the forums or the blogs, the Burr method is kind of the standard. How to build a portfolio, putting your properties in an LLC to limit your own risk, and then we'll wrap up with some questions if anyone has any. So just a bit about myself. Chris Bullock, CrossCountry Mortgage. I've been with CrossCountry since February of 2021. Prior to that, I sold new construction real estate in Columbus after graduating from Ohio State. And if you want a sandwich, Crystal, there's sandwiches over there too. Sold real estate, studied economics, got married, moved to Cleveland because my wife is from here. Classic story. Now I live in University Heights with my wife, my dog Harvey, and our cat Marcy. Everyone knows Marcy, I think. All right, so investment financing 101. Okay, basic, what's an investment property? We have to break it down into the property classifications. That's how does a lender look at how you'll be holding this property. Well, the first one is kind of obvious, owner occupied. That's you buying your own house and living in it. Number two is secondary. Think of that as a vacation home, somewhere you're going to maybe spend a couple of weeks there a year, but the rest of the time it's going to be either vacant or you're going to be renting it out through like a management company, think of a beach house or something like that. And then the third, what we're going to be talking about mostly today, is purely an investment property. So something you're never intending on living there. It is a vehicle for making you money and building equity and wealth. I want to touch on a little bit of house hacking versus pure investment. House hacking, if you're familiar, is kind of a blend of 1 and 3 here, where you're going to be buying a multifamily property. You're going to live in one unit. You're going to rent the other side out. Those that are really good at it, and if you get a chance to talk to Journey Tool about it, he has done it himself. You move in, you rent one side out, you renovate the property that you're living in. Down the road, your tenant's moving out, you flip to the other side, rent the renovated property or renovated unit out, you renovate that unit. Once it's all done, about a year down the road, now it's time to refinance the property. and move on to the next one. And you can rinse and repeat that really as many times as you'd like. For the most part, it was only FHA that was doing that, or rather, people were only using FHA to do the house hack because FHA allows you to buy multifamily with a minimum down payment of 3.5%. Now, conventional will allow you to do 5% down. So we have some options. I'll get into that next. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on was rental income. In many cases, you can use the rental income to qualify for the mortgage itself. There's a rent schedule that needs to be ordered through the appraisal. What we can end up using kind of depends on what the appraiser determines as market rent, but I rarely ever have issues with getting, a rent schedule that works for us, and, using that rental income to offset the mortgage. In many cases, you might not even need that much room in your debt to income ratio to be able to purchase an investment property. So what options are there for financing? FHA, that one, owner occupied only, 3.5% down. That's the house hacking favorite. We don't see obviously any pure investment through FHA because you have to live there. You have to live there for at least a year before you can move, at which point you can either refinance or sell the property altogether. Conventional, 5% down for owner occupied on multifamily. That's super awesome and fairly new. Purely, if you're looking at just an investment property, single family requires 20% down, multifamily requires 25% down. One thing I would say is if you put 40% or more down, you get the best possible interest rates no matter what. So in some cases, I'm suggesting, especially those with lower credit, I'm suggesting they go for a higher down payment just to mitigate having to pay a bunch of points or taking a high interest rate. The other thing, I don't have it on here, but conventional on an investment property with a sizable down payment can go pretty low on the credit score. I've done investment properties with people with a 630 credit score. So something to consider. Now, you do need to put about 40% down to do that, but those that can take advantage of it. And then the last one at the bottom, DSCR, that is a portfolio loan. So that is non-conventional, non-government. This is a loan that's going to be created by CrossCountry and held by CrossCountry. We're not going to sell it to a big federal bank or anything like that. The catch with DSCR is we're not going to look at the investor's income at all. We just totally ignore it, leave it blank. We're going to look instead at the rental income for the property. So as long as the rental income on the property is as much to cover the mortgage itself, it's good to go. The credit requirements are pretty low. You can go as low as 620. It does require 25% down. Your biggest trade-off is going to be the interest rates are a bit higher. But with DSCR, you can, I think the max is 25 properties you can do. So, it's super easy. These close in like 2 weeks, no problem, because there's no income verification or anything. You just, if it works, it works. Yeah. So DSCR, super popular these days. If you haven't gotten into the investment world, as soon as you do, that's the first thing everybody's going to bring up, is getting into these DSCR loans. So funds to close, that's going to be a big thing. I want to buy an investment property. I'm ready to go. But everything you just said requires, at least 5% down, maybe even 25% down. Where am I going to get that money? There's a few obvious ones: your checking and savings, your retirement or your investments. Depending on how an investor's portfolio is arranged, in many cases, they can borrow against their investments or their life insurance or something like that, and use that money to purchase a property or put a down payment down, I should say. Home equity line of credit, if they have other properties, even their primary residence, they can borrow against the equity they have and use that money to purchase a new property. This is a big part of the leverage to wealth. If you have equity somewhere that you're not accessing, that's great. That's it's good to have savings built up somewhere, whether it's in the walls of your home or in an investment account, a checking account, whatever. That being said, the savvier people out there, and if you're on TikTok and come across these investment TikTok people, the first thing they're going to say is you should be leveraging all your assets to make you more money. Because if the money just sits, it's not making you anything. So home equity line of credit, that's a popular one for sure. A cash out refinance. So if you have an existing property and you want to refinance it and pull some money out of it, we can do that for sure. That vehicle, we're not using it a whole lot because interest rates are up. You know, when interest rates were 3%, everyone was happy to refinance, take a nice low interest rate, pull a bunch of cash out. Now I see people going for the home equity line of credit more, just because it's temporary, that, you know, they'll pay it off eventually, or you know, depends what they plan on doing, but the cash out's a little more fixed. A 1031 exchange, this is kind of a niche thing, but if you have properties, you sell them, technically you've created a taxable event in that you've sold property and you've gotten all this windfall of cash in. Well, the government says, hey, we won't tax you on this if you move it into a new investment within a certain period of time. Well, there needs to be somewhere for that money to sit while they're, you know, finding that new investment. And that's what a 1031 exchange is. There's management companies out there. They're going to set up an account. It's temporary. I don't remember what the rules are. I want to say it's three to 6 months, 3 months. Yeah. So I just did one of these for an investor in California, actually a Keller Williams agent. He sold 3 properties in, I want to say like Utah, and he had a bunch of money. I mean, you know, several $100,000 that was in one of these. And he's like, I have to buy properties on these now, or I'm going to have to pay taxes on all of this. Well, you know, 25% down payments on houses in Cleveland, that was you know, we were able to buy like 6 properties with all of the money he had. And one thing, this shameless plug here, but CrossCountry, the way that we operate, if you want to do multiple loans at one time, I fill out one loan application, I copy it, let's say 6 times, and then I run all of them at the same time, same processor, same underwriter, everyone. So in many cases, we can have all the loans approved at the same time. We can have all of the closings at the same time. So it's a lot of writing for, you know, or signing, but we have the ability to do that. So a secured loan. So technically you can get a loan as long as it's against a secured asset. So something that has some physical value or monetary value tied to it. The most popular one is to borrow against someone's 401k or retirement accounts, rather than saying, okay, I want to actually pull money out of my retirement, pay taxes, pay fees. What a lot of the time they'll let you do is they'll just let you borrow against it up to a certain amount. Generally speaking, you can only access about half of your existing 401k. But if someone's got a nice sizable retirement account, we can borrow against that and use it to purchase property. And then, yeah, at the bottom, taxes and penalties. Anytime you're pulling money out, and I advise my investors of this, there's obviously the costs of purchasing this new home, your down payment, your closing costs, all of that. But you're also going to, by accessing these funds on some of these avenues, you may have taxes and penalties to pay for accessing those funds. So might want to take that into consideration whenever you're considering your total investment. Any questions on the Zoom? Chris, one question? No. Let's cover some pros and cons here. So some pros, obviously, you build equity. You own real estate. Just look at the last like 5 years. If you owned a piece of real estate and you just sat on it and didn't do a thing to it, you made money. It's a pretty safe investment. You know, I don't have the chart in front of me. It would have been a good thing to add, but you know, over the last like 50 years, there was like 1 year that real estate actually devalued. There were a handful of times where, you know, it didn't go up, it didn't go down, it just stayed the same. But for the most part, most of the time, it's going up. What I like to tell people, especially my investors, is if you're flipping a property, obviously there's some calculations on how much value you're going to be able to get out of that. What I focus on is holding the property and actually renting it out and managing it that way. And a big part of that is, hey, if you just want to buy a house, rent it out for a year and then sell it, I can't guarantee that you'll break even on that just because we don't know what property values will do in such a short term period. That being said, let's say you hold on to it for 4, 5, 6 years. There's a really good chance you're going to make money just by holding it, not even factoring in the fact that you're going to be collecting rent on it. And with a lot of the houses here in Northeast Ohio, they cash flow. What cash flow means is once you've collected rent, you've paid whatever utilities and the mortgage and everything, you're still you're still making money. You're bringing money in. Cash flowing is a super, I don't know how to say it. I want to say important. Like it's important to a lot of investors, especially national investors. They want to buy in areas. No worries. They want to buy in an area where homes cash flow, and that's why Northeast Ohio is extremely popular. Um, oh, I put on here too. They're great clients. They really are. I mean, one of the most friendly communities you can be a part of are these national investor groups. You can find them on Facebook. Bigger Pockets. If you've never heard of it, Google Bigger Pockets. Uh, I've been on a number of national Zooms, international Zooms, where I'm giving advice on investments and building portfolios. And literally everyone is just trying to help everybody out. It's super friendly. And I guess there's two sides of the coin here. Because it's not their property that they're going to live in, they're not as emotionally stressed about the transaction as like a first-time home buyer who this is like everything to them. For investors, it either works or it doesn't. A lot of the time they have money, so they're not, scoffing at the home inspection. They're not getting upset that, they need an appraisal reinspection or anything. They understand that there's cost to this process. They're going into it, ready to spend the money and make sure that they get this investment. And if it ends up not working out, a lot of the time they go, well, I guess we'll get the next one. So it's kind of nice. At the same time, you have to chase them around for things because they're not as emotionally invested in it. Trying to get them to sign an addendum a couple days before closing can be like pulling hair out. But I do think they're great clients and really enjoy working with them. Some of the cons, obviously, landlord responsibilities. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone buy a house and then, 2 months down the road, they say, I get them a call, hey, how's it going? How's the house? Furnace crapped out, 2 weeks in. Oh, man, you just never know. They're going to have to obviously take on that responsibility. What I do recommend is a good management company will help mitigate some of that. If you're working with out-of-state investors, I highly, highly recommend they get a management company because it would be impossible. If you're in California, you've got a house in University Heights, what are you going to do? Hop on a flight to come fix a faucet? It's crazy. So they should get a management company. One thing to consider is vacancy. It's not a slam dunk that you're going to rent your house out necessarily, especially for those that are a little more strict. There was an investor that I worked with. He purchased a property. He only wanted to rent to people that had 3 months rent up front and a 750 credit score. That person will buy a house. Yeah. So it's like, I was like, that person's not renting. You need to set your standards to a point that makes more sense for renters. His big complaint was he was having a hard time filling the property. Well, you're probably going to have a hard time. And then the startup costs, obviously we talked about the funds to close and where to access those, but I have a lot of people who call me and they want to purchase, but they don't have that down payment and they don't have a vehicle to access it. And unfortunately, the conversation comes down to you're just gonna have to save up a bit more before we can do this. So. Maybe. Just a few things to keep in mind. Tax benefits. There are certainly tax benefits to owning investment properties. any real estate agents, you would know that you file your Schedule C, or someone, your accountant files your Schedule C, and you can write off expenses on there so that you can lower your tax liability. You can do the exact same thing with an investment property. You can write off literally everything. There are a number of investors I work with who are showing that that property makes no money at all. So they're not paying any taxes on that rental income. That being said, and we'll get into that in the next slide, you do want to show some income on there if you want, excuse me, the income to qualify for future profits. Flipping rules. So this is pretty much for, investors that are looking to just buy a property, flip it, cash out, quickly. There are some rules with who can purchase a property after you flip it. For example, FHA. If you buy a house for $50,000, you put a bunch of money into it, and now you're trying to sell it for $150,000. Well, you bought it only 2.5 months ago. FHA may not allow you to close on that house or even apply for an FHA loan until you reach 90 days. So you would have to wait to go into contract, or rather, the person that wants to buy your house, if they're using FHA, would have to wait until that 90-day mark. Even then, between 90 days and 6 months, if it goes up by more than 100%, a second appraisal is required. So it's not the end of the world. We can certainly navigate this, but some lenders aren't aware of these rules. They get into contract, they submit a loan application, then you find out, hey, we just can't do this because of the timing. So it's good to know the rules up front. Point of sale and escrow rules, that's, depending on the neighborhood you're working in, point of sale can be one of the biggest headaches you have. Simply put, it's best to advise investors, especially if they're out-of-state investors, on what point of sale is, what to expect. And it's kind of tough because it's neighborhood by neighborhood. If you're in University Heights, Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, I would say just expect to have some delays there, expect there to be some required changes. One nice thing that we can do here at CrossCountry is, let's say that there's a driveway repair and it's a day like today in the middle of January. We're obviously not going to be able to repair a driveway on a day like today. I can actually have the funds, whether it comes from the buyer or the seller, put into an escrow account to fix the driveway down the road once the weather improves. So we can close on the deal and then deal with that point of sale issue down the road. So if you have any issues like that, I've run into some deals where I'm not even on the transaction, and then I get brought in at the end because the lender they were working with wasn't willing to escrow funds for that. So if you run into that, let me know. Changing guidelines. This kind of goes with financing in general, but guidelines are changing all the time. We stay up to date on all of those, and we'll always advise people, but it's good to keep in mind that, hey, sometimes things change, sometimes requirements change. A big thing that changed a few years ago, or like a year ago now, was pricing changed. So rates changed, how people were being, certain qualifications that gave you certain interest rates changed, and people's rates were higher than they expected. To, things are always changing, but we'll let you know. Lender requirements, sometimes, depending on the program you're qualifying for, you may need history of being a landlord. That's either an existing lease or taxes filed showing that you have an investment property. Rental income, there are some very specific cases where you actually can't qualify you can't use the rental income if you don't have rent or a mortgage on your existing home. So here's the example. I had someone, she lived with her parents. She wanted to buy an investment property. The big federal banks, the guidelines said, well, that's perfectly fine, but you can't use expected rental income to offset the mortgage. Weird rule. Don't know why it exists, but it did, and we weren't able to use that to offset. Leases, a lot of the times if a property is rented, we'll need the leases. the appraiser actually requires those, and we have to send them over to them. And then tax returns, depending on their history of being a landlord, if they're self-employed, we may need tax returns, or will likely need tax returns to see that income and show that they're not taking a loss in their personal business. Filing taxes. This fun form here on the left, it's a Schedule E. That is the schedule that actually you would file for your rental income. So, hi there. Grab a sandwich if you want. So, the Schedule E for rental income, you can see here all these expenses. This is where you can write everything off. Bottom line can't affect future purchases and refinances. Reason being, if you have someone that owns 10 properties, they want to use that rental income to offset the mortgage for a new property, but they're showing no income, or even they're showing losses on these properties, we end up having to actually account for that loss. So their income looks like it's going down, not up, from these properties. So I usually advise people, hey, how you file this is extremely important. Make sure you're communicating with your accountant. Mr. or Mrs. Accountant, I want to buy a house next year. You're filing my 2023 taxes. I can't show a loss on these properties, or it's going to affect my ability. So when they know that, they can, not write everything under the sun off. Self-employed income, extremely important for building a portfolio. So anyone that works with a self-employed borrower or buyer, the way that they file their taxes is super, super important. If you have anyone that's self-employed right now who doesn't think that they can buy, they haven't filed their 2023 taxes yet, please have them get a hold of me. What I can do, and I do this with a lot of people, I will take a look at their income. I'll take a look at their tax history. I'll even call their accountant and I'll say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Accountant, we want to buy a property at the beginning of this year. We need the 23 taxes filed. Make sure you show at least $70,000 of income. And they go, okay, I can do that. And then they'll work the taxes up to show that they have, obviously they need to make that much money, but they can mitigate, expenses to the point where, oh, okay, now my bottom line actually works to qualify. I have four people right now, some that are buying their own homes, some that are buying investment properties. Last year, they wrote everything off, showed no income, or basically no income. I've talked to their accountants. Once they file here in the next month or so, they're going to be able to purchase, because we're going to set the taxes up the right way. So that is, yes. The BRRRR method. So this is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Easily the favorite for how to start your portfolio, or just run your portfolio once it's built. Do you guys do Bigger Pockets at all? You ever messed with that website? Google it and check it out. It's pretty interesting. You can sign up and they'll send you leads if you want to, where, it's not even like a Zillow. Basically, if an investor wants to start an investment portfolio, they can get on this website, they pay a fee to be a member, and then they will connect them with real estate agents in the certain area that they want to invest in. Cleveland is one of the most popular for that. And then, there you go. You have someone in California, let's say, who wants to invest. And I mean, Journey uses them a lot, and I mean, super successful. It's a great program. So check it out. Bigger Pockets. Yep. A big part of what I like to do too is, if I know someone wants to do the BRRRR method, someone wants to start this process, I'm going to be advising them not only on the purchase side. I think you run into a lot of loan officers who are more than happy to just do the purchase and then cross it off their list and forget about it. For me, there is buy and refinance and repeat. So, I'm helping someone build a portfolio, not just do one deal and then never talk to them again. So if you have people work with me, I'm advising them, on long term. I've done everything from help someone start their house hack. I've helped people buy their first investment property. Some of the really fun stuff is I helped one guy a couple years ago whenever the rates were a bit lower. He had three investment properties. He refinanced all three at the exact same time, and we put those three through, closed, and then he bought three more properties with the cash out, and that was like all at the same time as well. So, yes.
So this method, what do you think about this method with new construction? Because what I find is that if you rehab enough houses, you actually understand the whole building of
Yeah.
property, right?
Yeah.
So you could build a property,
Mhm.
let's say with cash.
Sure.
Because you got enough with all the
Right.
build a property with cash, and then you, at the end, you rent it
Yeah.
and refinance.
Yeah.
Pull the money back.
Absolutely.
And so that will still work.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. It's just about knowing if they have the capital to do that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't see why not. Yeah. Especially, I mean, there's plenty of neighborhoods where there's vacant lots that's owned by the land bank that's just sitting there, and they'll
And you can get them for like
$1,000,
$1,000.
and a lot of the time the city will tax abate them for like 15 years. So you're paying $200 a year in taxes or something. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So yeah, if you know someone out there that's, willing to do it, I would say slam dunk. Yeah.
Would CrossCountry help and aid in that situation like that if they want to be a builder or in that kind of?
We have a construction department that would fund, but I'm pretty sure it's owner occupied only. I would have to check. I mean, we work with so many different banks, like we broker out. We might be able to broker to someone that does investor construction, but I would have to check. Yeah. Good idea though, for sure. All right, so we bought that property, we bought your first property. Now we want to build a portfolio, because the biggest thing about you're building wealth, you're reaching a point where maybe you're not working in the same capacity as you were before, because you have this vehicle that's working for you, We start small, whether it's house hacking, a low price point, multifamily. Definitely multifamily is a great way to start. I can't tell you how many houses in, let's say, Akron, for example, that comes to mind because I'm doing one right now. 2-family home, it's 140. The mortgage on it is $750 because the taxes are so low. The anticipated rent is like $2,000. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So the anticipated mortgage is $750 on $140,000.
Yeah, he's putting 40% down. So the mortgage is 84,000. The taxes are $115 a month or something like that. And it's 2-family, yeah. Yeah, check it out. I mean, there are a ton of neighborhoods that you can do that. Akron is a popular one. Yeah. Youngstown, Lorraine, I mean, Cleveland, all around Cleveland. Oh yeah. So once you've got that first house, it's rented out, you're making a little money on it. We're building equity. Next, we're going to get into the BRRRR method. We're going to start rehabbing it. We're going to refinance it. We're going to leverage that existing equity that you have. Once you have, I believe it's 6 months that you have to wait before you can do a new appraisal, and we can go off the higher value. But now, you took that $50,000 property and you turned it into a $150,000 property. You can access up to 70 to 75% of the new equity. So you got cash you can access. And we can put that cash to work by buying another property. Maximizing loan limits. I've worked with a few investors who have maximized their loan limits, and their portfolios are crazy. Conventional will let you max out at technically 11. You can have 10 investment properties and then one primary residence. The DSCR program, you can have a total of 25 mortgages. So what I tell people is once you get to 10 or 11, we're looking DSCR at that point, and we're gonna go all the way to the top. And once you get to the max, which most people, they don't even get to the max before they start moving these into a personal portfolio, moving them into an LLC. Now they have a business. They can go to a business bank and get an actual, a business line of credit. They can buy out these loans and move them into umbrella policies that now they have a company. These homes are a company that they own rather than them owning individual properties and managing them. I did a loan for a gentleman. He had 84 properties all across the US. It was crazy. Oh, they were all over St. Louis, Arizona, just outside of Pittsburgh. He had a bunch here in Cleveland. He actually lived here. He was buying houses all around like Cleveland Heights. Crazy, honestly. And the number of mortgages and properties he actually owned over his lifetime was even crazier, hundreds and hundreds, because he had 84 at one time. He had, yeah, I was doing loans for him just because the rates were low. So he was like, I'll buy more properties and hang on to more money rather than paying cash. He had like 6 loans, but he had over 80 other properties that were in an LLC under a corporation that were separate that he owned 100% of. So it was super impressive. He'll never have to do, I think he was an accountant before he got into real estate investing. He'll never do that ever again. He'll never file taxes ever again because he just owns all of this stuff. And if he ever needed to, something tragic happened and he had to close up business or whatever, he could start selling those off and retire, whenever. It's crazy. I mean, if you're looking to inspire someone on getting into this, look no further than a story like that. Sean, you guys know Sean Hadley. He worked with a guy to buy his first investment property. This is years ago. I think he worked for the Northeast Ohio Sewer District. So, he wasn't a lawyer or a CEO or anything. He was a regular guy who was starting a portfolio. Years later, after Sean had helped him buy his second property, he wanted to purchase a primary residence, like a $750,000 house. And whenever Sean got his taxes, he had grown that first couple of properties that he had done into 25. He quit at the sewer district, and that's all he did, was manage his own portfolio. He was basically semi-retired and buying a $750,000 house. Pretty amazing. Forming an LLC, a couple points to this. Your lender can't form the LLC for your investor or for yourself. That being said, if you need a recommendation of a real estate attorney or a corporate attorney, more than happy to make a recommendation. They would be able to open that up for you. The biggest thing is it just limits your liability. Let's say you enter into a contract on something and it goes awry, or you've got renters who are making a claim against you, let's say a lawsuit. Having that in an LLC will mean that the LLC would dissolve before they were able to go and access any of your personal finances or your own, let's say your primary residence. So it's just smart to move these over. One thing that I do want to say, with conventional lending, they will not allow you to close an investment property in an LLC. DSCR and any of the portfolio loans, we can close in an LLC. So if they absolutely want to, we have the ability to do that, but they're really going to just be stuck with the DSCR and the portfolio loan. What I tell people is, if you do a conventional loan on a property and you're ready to, that's crazy out there, and you're ready to move it over to an LLC, technically there's a form you sign at closing called due on sale. And basically what that is if the lender ever realizes that the property is no longer in title for the name that it closed with, your personal name, now it's in so-and-so LLC, they have the right to call that loan due, meaning it's due today in full, you have to pay it off. How often does that happen? Not very often. But all of my investors, I warn them, when you move this, there is the potential for this to be called due. What would happen? You would need to refinance the property, or do a quick claim and try and get it back into your name right away. That being said, I have plenty of investors that go, thanks for the advice, Chris. And then 2 weeks later, it's in an LLC. So I just like to throw that out there so that everyone.
Yeah. That's what cross-country rules are, right?
Yeah, my understanding is I think conventional in general. Yeah. I would have to check, but yeah. We can do it. It's just it has to go portfolio. So I hope this was helpful. Any questions or anything?
This was recorded.
Yes, I believe it was. Any questions on the Zoom? 40 minutes. Perfect. Cool. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you tuning in on Zoom. Hey, Brian, where do these get posted?
I will get it posted by tomorrow at the latest.
Okay, perfect. Cool. So feel free to let me know if you have any questions or if you need anything at all. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, great. I'm gonna need